Madam Vice Chair, I'm just letting you know, it sounds like Penchetta Barnett is just trying to get in touch with us. So we will reach out to Penchetta and see if they need help getting into the meeting.
Perfect. And are we expecting Jeff and Robert?
I have not heard otherwise. I don't believe
Okay,
they've let us know that they wouldn't be attending. Um,
so maybe we'll give it another minute or so, and then you give the go ahead, and we can start.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll tell you when you're comfortable starting, you just let me know. We are streaming. We're all set to go. So anytime you're set, you're ready to go.
All right, let's do it. Just wait for the rest of the board to come on camera. Morning, Jeff.
Jeff, can we hear your audio, please?
Hi.
There we go. That sounds great. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Okay, Matthew, I think go.
That sounds good. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. My name is Julia Rady, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Toronto Preservation Board. We have quorum, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Today's meeting is being held by video conference and is also being live streamed online at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. Although we may be meeting in different locations today, Community Council would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. If you are registered to speak at today's meeting, please listen for me to call your name. I will call speakers in the order they appear on the list. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Toronto Preservation Board link at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. Members, the City Clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council and on CMP, the Clerk's meeting portal. Clerk's IT staff are available to members if you need help with your devices. I also want to remind you to please submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at hertpb@toronto.ca to help with motions. At this time, are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do have an interest, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and indicate the item number and the nature of the interest. Seeing none, we can proceed. May I please have a motion to confirm the minutes from our last meeting on July 13th, 2023? Moved by Barbara. All those in favor? Carried. We'll now proceed with the agenda review. The first item is PB.9.1, 822 Richmond Street, Notice of Intention to Designate a Property under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There is a staff report with recommendations. Would anyone like to hold this item? If so, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and let me know. Seeing none, I will move, or if anybody would like to do this honor, to move the recommendations in the report. I will move the recommendations in the report. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. The next item is PB 9.2, 60 Lowther Avenue, notice of intention to designate under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There is a staff report with recommendations. Would anyone like to hold this item? If so, let me know. Seeing no, I will move the recommendations. Oh, yes, Barb, you want to hold the report? No, you want to move the report? So, Barb will move the recommendations in the report. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. The next item is PB 9.3, 509 Parliament Street, notice of intention to designate a property under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There are still registered speakers on this item. Yes, Matthew, there are no registered speakers on this item.
I'll just let you, maybe I can update the board as well. The speaker who was registered on this item is withdrawn. The same person had registered on item 4. They've withdrawn from both of those items, but there is still one speaker registered on item 4.
So
That's
there are no.
Just as of this morning.
Thank you. So there are no registered speakers on this item. Does anybody want to hold this item? Barb?
Can I just ask, I have Philip Evans on item 3. Is he also withdrawn?
This is Philip Evans. I have not withdrawn.
Okay, so there is a
Sorry.
speaker.
There's a speaker on 3.
Okay.
There's no speaker on 4. I'm sorry, I had those two mixed up. I apologize. There's still a speaker on 3. My apologies.
Smoothly, there was going to be a few bumps. So we have a registered speaker on item 3, so I will hold this item. The next item is PB 9.4, 402 and 404 Sherburne Street, inclusion on the Heritage Register. There are registered speakers on this item, so I will hold this item down. Members, as you've seen.
Sorry,
yes.
He's withdrawn from 4, so there are no speakers on item 4.
Okay. Now there are no. There's a few bumps. Anyway, there are no speakers on item 4. Would anybody else like to hold this item? Seeing none. Would anybody like to move the recommendations in the staff report? Barb. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. So members, as you've seen, there's also a new item of business to introduce. The agenda item is listed on the website as PB 9.5, 401 Yonge Street, alterations to a designated heritage property and authority to enter into a heritage easement agreement. This is, and the clerks are going to display it, my motion to introduce the report from the city solicitor on 401 Yonge Street. Are there any questions? Seeing none, if not, I will take a vote to introduce this item. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. So I propose that we hold down this new item until the end of our meeting, which makes sense because it still falls at the end of our meeting. So we have some additional time to review the material. So we're now going to go back to PB 9.3 because we've held it for speakers. So I think we have a staff report on this item, and so I will turn it over there.
Yes, through the chair, good morning, members of the board, Madam Chair and Councillor Perks. My name is Clint Robertson, and I'm a heritage planner with the City of Toronto in policy and research. This morning, I'll be presenting item PB 9.3, 509 Parliament Street, Notice of Intention to Designate a Property under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Clint, I was waiting for you to pause. I actually am waiting for share permissions.
Oh.
There we go. All right. Sorry for the delay.
Yeah, so next slide, please. As can be seen in the location map on this slide, the subject property, historically known as the Carleton Theatre, is located mid-block on the east side of Parliament Street between Carleton and Winchester Streets in the Cabbagetown community. Next slide. This slide shows a current photograph of the property, which was constructed 1929 to 30 in an understated classical revival style. Its original use was that of a movie theater until 1954, when that use ceased and it became a CBC production studio and orchestra venue until 1992. In 1995, it became the home of the Canadian Children's Dance Theatre, now known as Canadian Contemporary Dance Theatre. The property was listed on the City of Toronto's Heritage Register by City Council in March 2023. Heritage planning staff conducted research and evaluation on the property at 509 Parliament Street and determined that it meets Ontario Regulation 906 for design and physical, historical, and contextual values. Next slide, please. The property has contextual value given that it's functionally and historically linked to its surroundings as an integral component of Cabbagetown's Main Street context and character, occupying a central location on Parliament Street. Like most community main streets in the early 20th century, local movie theaters were integral entertainment venues contributing to that neighborhood and Main Street character, with the Carleton Theatre assuming that role on Cabbagetown's Main Street. From 1931 to 54, the Carleton Theatre was one of the entertainment venues and a social focal point of Cabbagetown at a time when attending movies was a popular form of entertainment. In addition to the Carleton, the community boasted 5 other theatres. Of these, only the Carleton survives in recognizable form as a purpose-built theatre. After its movie theatre use, the building remained an arts and entertainment venue during CBC's tenure for audiences attending concerts of the CBC Orchestra, other live music programs, as well as broadcast productions such as the popular comedy show, the Royal Canadian Air Farce. From 1995 to present, it has been the home of the Canadian Children's Dance Theatre, originally known as the Canadian, originally it's the home of Canadian Contemporary Dance, originally the Canadian Children's Dance Theatre. Next slide. Also, in terms of contextual value, the building contributes to defining and supporting the historic Main Street of Parliament Street, the Main Street character of Parliament Street, which in the 500 block includes several other properties listed on Toronto's Heritage Register. Across the street at 502 to 508 Parliament Street is row housing comprising 4 properties dating from 1879 and placed on the register in 1975. To the north, the end of the block is occupied by the 1888 Lakeview or Winchester Hotel, placed on the register in 1995 and designated by bylaw in 1995. Additionally, the property borders the Cabbagetown Metcalfe Heritage Conservation District to the rear. Next slide. The Carleton Theatre is a representative example of a style and features a restrained and understated classical revival style treatment, similar to the other theatre's architect H.G. Dewar designed in the 1920s. The one-story building features a symmetrical facade with a stepped and paneled red brick parapet and ashlar artificial stone storefront detailing. A stylized detail frieze atop the storefront in the artificial stone finish serves to further the classical revival style character. Although the infilling of the storefronts has affected the appearance of the facade, the configurations of the openings have been respected and the artificial stone storefront trim has been retained. The conservative classical aesthetic of the exterior was also carried over into the interior with simple, clean finishes in the lobby and the 1,015-seat auditorium. The auditorium was relatively austere, except for some elegantly placed finishes in a combination of Art Deco and classical motifs. Such finishes include extant pilasters or piers lining the walls, ornamented with Art Deco style capitals and classical medallions, as well as a stylized cornice encircling the space, which also remains. The molding which surrounds the screen is also intact. Next, the building is a representative example of a style and survives as the only purpose-built theater in Cabbagetown in recognizable form. While such building types were once common, with Cabbagetown alone having 5 other purpose-built neighborhood theaters, these theaters have been demolished or irreversibly altered, with none in use as an arts or theater venue. Not only does the Carlton Theatre retain stylistic elements of its exterior and interior, but also the 3-part structural form typical of traditional movie theaters in the early 20th century, with lobby in the front of the building, auditorium in the middle, and a stage or screen at the rear. A steel truss roof allows for an unobstructed clear span of the auditorium space. Next slide. Finally, the building is historically significant for its association with Herbert Dewar, born 1891 and died 1966, a Pittsburgh-born and trained architect who demonstrated a versatility in his range of work, but became known for his theater design in Canada with the growing popularity of cinema in the 1920s. From the late 1920s through the late 1940s, Dewar designed at least half a dozen theaters in the Toronto area, including the Donlands Theatre at 397 Donlands Avenue, as well as more than a dozen theaters elsewhere, mostly in smaller Ontario cities, but also in a couple locations in Quebec and Nova Scotia. While Dewar's earliest theater work reflects both a conservative aesthetic mixed with more elaborate revival styles, such as the subject property, by the mid-1930s, Dewar had embraced a more modern aesthetic. Employing this aesthetic, the famous Players chain retained him as their corporate architect to design their theaters across Ontario. In addition to theaters, Dewar's work consisted of a variety of other types of buildings, including apartment houses, stores, factories, and warehouses. Surviving examples of Dewar's work in Toronto includes the 1937 modern-style Creed's Furniture Building at Davenport and Bedford Roads, which was listed on the city's Heritage Register in 1997. Therefore, since the property meets each of the 3 criteria categories under Ontario Regulation 906, staff are recommending the designation of 509 Parliament Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And that concludes my presentation. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Clint. We have one speaker on this item. To the clerk, can you confirm that we are ready to proceed?
Yes, I believe Philip is with us now. I think he has, yep, he's right on camera.
Perfect. Philip, you have 5 minutes, and I will give you a cutoff time when you're getting close to the end. Go for it.
So much. I won't make this too lengthy. And Clint, thanks so much. That was great. I'll just make everyone aware we've submitted a letter to suggest that or just to fill everyone in on just the context of an application that's come forward, and that this is partly in response to that application. The application proposal describes the retention of the front portion of the theater. In our findings of the share at ERA, we found it wasn't a strong candidate for designation. It's actually been a dance studio longer than it had been a movie theater, and as such, it had been carved up quite a bit to function as such. I would say, in addition, the statement of significance identifies a number of interior attributes, which is often in the many theaters that I've been involved with, our office has been involved with, it's not as common. So it identifies a number of interior finishes, pilasters. I'll say, and I think it's in Clint's full report as well. There are photographs of it. They are quite modest. It does identify the actual theater portion and the stage, along with stairwells and corridors and ceiling heights. So I think that's quite unusual for what we typically see, and we hope to work through a process of what would be an appropriate conservation with staff on this site, and we're confident that can happen. Our recommendation to include the building as a kind of urban form and record of that urban form and its contribution to the street, we think would be achieved through the proposal, but we'd ask for consideration of again of our share, and if it is going to be designated, we've offered up a few tweaks to reflect what is of value and exclude many of those features on the interior of this building. So thank you so much, and happy to answer any questions, but have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Philip. Barb, do you have a question for our speaker?
Yeah, just one question. Philip, you indicate it's not a strong candidate, but does it meet the minimum requirement for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act? I haven't seen your share, so I'm asking, does your share conclude that it actually meets the requirement?
Yeah, it would meet the requirement. It checks off the required number of boxes. So
so what do you define as strong? Like, you're using this word strong, which if it meets the requirement, I guess I'm throwing in this word strong seems like to be a bit of a diversion from the fact that it meets the requirements.
yes, no, that's a fair question. For us, it met the minimum number of requirements for that, Barbara, and we did not think it had strong design value, and it of the architect's full portfolio of work, we felt as though it was not as strong as some of their other work, and not as notable as reflected in Clint's presentation.
But you would agree that it does meet what is required to be designated under the Ontario Heritage Act.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and we were very clear and transparent and upfront about that in our share. I just some of these buildings and assets, they are strong. They will check 7, 8, 9 of those boxes. This was not one of those for us, Barbara, just in full transparency of our findings.
But is it not true that there is nowhere under the requirements that you have to the number, all it has to meet is the minimum. It doesn't matter if it meets 9 or 2, it has to meet the minimum.
No, absolutely, and the municipality has every authority to put it on their list of inventory and designate those buildings. And as I said, our proposal incorporates the building as seen from the street in the front portion of that building. So we recognize that it had an urban form contribution as well, and as such incorporated that into the design. I would just ask if we're moving forward, if municipality is moving forward with designation, let's get the reflection of what has value, and exclude those interior elements, which again, there's often a higher threshold for that in my experience. And I would ask consideration of that.
Could you define higher threshold? Why would there be a higher threshold for interior?
Typically we see attributes describing what's in the public interest and what can be seen from the street. Of all the adaptive reuse projects we've been involved with, that's been consistent. The building across the street, which is just being wrapped up, adapted and reused for affordable housing, and really lovely design, set of row houses there. We had the flexibility of modifying, adapting, and reusing. The way that the attributes are written here, it seems as though the intent is to maintain it in its use as a theater when it's describing the actual theater and its stage itself. And if that's the intention, it does limit our ability to adapt and reuse. So when we see interior attributes coming forward, often they're quite special, and I'm kind of trying to figure out what if that mark of, or that threshold of special is suited here. So
Okay, thank you.
yep, no problem.
Just before we do other questions, can I check to see, is Panchetta here? And if so, can you say hello?
Yes, I'm in. Thank you.
Thank you. Just wanted to confirm.
Yes, thanks.
Are there any other questions for our speaker? Seeing none, do we have any questions for staff? Barb.
Yes, I have a question of staff. The question is about the interior elements, and would staff, putting this in a question, could the staff just basically outline why they chose these particular interior attributes to be listed in the statement of designation?
Sure. Again, Clint Robertson, and I'm happy to address that. So basically, there was two points that were heritage attributes relating to the interior. The first, interior finishes, including the auditorium pilasters or piers ornamented with Art Deco motifs and classical medallions, and the auditorium stylized cornice and screen opening moldings. And then secondly, the elements of the original interior configuration, including entrance vestibule, shallow interior lobby extending into corridors with stairways, and the extended ceiling height and open volume space of the auditorium. So the first point related directly to the style and reinforced its classical revival style with Art Deco motifs. So those elements do exist, and the screen opening moldings not only were a decorative feature, but also relate specifically to the theater use, so surviving elements of the theater use. The second point about the interior configuration is important because it speaks directly to the type of building it was. So this layout, and particularly the extended ceiling height and open volume of the space, speak directly to its type as a theater. And so I mean, these elements do exist, and I think that we have to, these items do exist. We can't pretend that they don't, and we can't really jump ahead to thinking of how to manage the space when the role right here is to identify the heritage attributes and why the building is important, which the report does. So yeah, that is why I chose to include these elements, because they speak directly to the style and to the type, which is theater type.
Okay, thank you. Just one other question. There was another recommendation, and it was with the language to deal with the roof form. Can you you have used the term ERA has pointed out that it's not a domed roof. Could you clarify that, please?
It is a domed roof. It's a truss ceiling, a steel truss ceiling, and I mean, it's not a rounded dome roof, but it's essentially a dome roof, and it creates a clear span so that the auditorium has no pillars or supports.
So is the clarification that you're describing it from the interior and ERA is describing it from what you can see from the exterior?
Oh, yes, sorry. I was describing the interior,
Okay.
the
Okay.
interior form of the ceiling and the roof.
Okay, thank you for the
But
clarification.
in fact, that is the exterior form as well.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any more questions for Clint? Seeing none, thank you so much, Clint, and thank you for the report. Is there discussion amongst us? Seeing none, does anybody want to move the recommendations of the staff report? Barbara, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah.
Yes.
Just because we can't see Panchetta, may I just ask?
Recorded vote.
Yeah, not so much a recorded vote. If you could just maybe just have Panchetta state her vote out loud, just as she's the only one.
On phone. Panchetta,
Yeah.
are you in agreement with the PB 9.3 and moving the staff report?
Yes.
Thank you. So we're now moving on to our new business item, PB 9.5, 401 Yonge Street, held by me. There is no staff report on this item, but we have before us a confidential attachment. Anything that we would like to discuss will have to move into private session. But before that, are there questions? Do we want to move into private to discuss? Seeing none, do I have anybody who wishes to move the recommendations? Councillor Perks? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Panchetta. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. That concludes our business for today in a record 35 minutes. Thank you, everyone, very, very much.
But they're all this easy? Lovely to meet you all.
This is unusual.
This is unusual. Ooh. I'm scared for the next one. Anyway, thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Good job, Julia.
You too.